He humiliated me in front of everyone, until my wolf awakened and left the entire pack in shock. The fire cracked loud in the center of the gathering circle, and every eye in the Blackthorn pack turned toward Elena Whitmore as Damien's voice rang out across the clearing. She has no wolf. She never will. Look at her standing there like she belongs among us. Elena felt her face burn as laughter rippled through the crowd. Hundreds of pack members stood in a wide circle around the fire, their eyes glinting gold and amber in the firelight, and every single one of them was looking at her. She wanted the earth to open and swallow her whole. "Please," she whispered, though she knew no one would listen. "Don't do this." Damien Blackthorn stepped closer, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the dirt. He was the Alpha's son, the future leader of the pack, broad-shouldered and confident, with dark hair and eyes that could freeze a room. Tonight those eyes were locked on Elena with something close to disgust. "The claiming ceremony exists to pair strong wolves together," he said, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. "Wolves who will lead this pack into the future, and somehow the spirits chose to pair me with a girl who has never even shifted, a girl the elders call wolfless." The word hit her like a slap. Wolfless. She had heard it whispered behind her back for years, but never spoken so openly, never shouted for the entire pack to hear. "I am not wolfless," Elena said, though her voice shook. "My wolf is just slow to come. It happens sometimes." "Slow?" Damien laughed, and several pack members laughed with him. "You are 18 years old, Elena. Every wolf in this pack shifted by 14. Your own sister shifted at 12. What excuse is there for someone like you?" Elena searched the crowd for her sister, hoping for one friendly face, but even Mira looked away, embarrassed to be associated with her. Elena's parents stood near the back, their heads down, unable to meet her eyes. They had spent years making excuses for her, telling neighbors she was simply a late bloomer, hiding her from pack gatherings whenever they could. Tonight there had been no hiding. The claiming ceremony required every unmated wolf between 16 and 25 to stand in the circle, and the spirits had chosen names at random from a carved wooden bowl. Her name had come out paired with his, and now the entire pack knew exactly what the future Alpha thought of her. "I refuse this pairing," Damien announced, turning to address the elders, who sat on a raised platform at the edge of the clearing. "I will not bond myself to a wolf who does not exist. Choose again." A murmur spread through the crowd. Rejecting a claiming ceremony pairing was rare, and always caused talk, but rejecting one this publicly, with this much cruelty, was something Elena had never seen before. She had watched other claiming ceremonies as a child, had seen awkward pairings and disappointed faces, but she had never seen anyone humiliated the way she was being humiliated now. "Damien!" The Alpha's voice cut through the noise, low and warning. Gareth Blackthorn stood at the edge of the platform, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. "Watch your words." "I am simply speaking the truth, Father." Damien did not back down. He turned back to Elena, and for a moment, something almost like pity crossed his face, before it hardened again into contempt. "I am sorry, Elena, but I cannot pretend this is acceptable. A future Alpha needs a mate who can stand beside him, who can fight beside him, who has a wolf spirit strong enough to protect this pack. What do you have to offer? You cannot even shift. You are barely pack at all." The crowd fell silent, waiting to see what would happen next. Elena felt every pair of eyes on her skin like tiny needles. She thought about running, about turning and disappearing into the trees before anyone could see her cry, but her legs would not move. She stood frozen in the firelight, humiliation burning through her chest. "That is enough," the Alpha said, finally stepping down from the platform. "Damien, you have made your point. The elders will discuss a new pairing at a later time." But the damage had already been done. Elena could hear whispers starting around the circle, could see people turning to their neighbors, repeating what Damien had said, adding their own cruel commentary. Wolfless. Not really pack. Should never have been allowed to stand in the circle at all. Elena's mother finally pushed through the crowd to reach her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. But even that comfort felt hollow now. The entire pack had heard. There was no taking it back. "Come on," her mother whispered. "Let's go home." But Elena shook her head. She could not walk through that crowd, could not pass by all those staring faces, could not bear to see Damien standing there with his arms crossed, looking satisfied with himself for putting her in her place. Instead, she turned and ran the other way, toward the tree line, ignoring her mother's calls behind her. She ran until the fire's glow disappeared behind her, and the only light came from the moon filtering through the branches above. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but she kept running, as if she could somehow outrun the humiliation still ringing in her ears. Wolfless. Barely pack at all. She had heard those words her whole life in quieter forms, but never like this. Never in front of everyone she had ever known. Elena had been born into the Blackthorn pack 18 years ago, the second daughter of 2 respected pack members. Her father worked as a tracker, one of the best in the territory, and her mother helped run the pack's medical house, tending to injuries and illnesses among their people. They were good, solid pack members, well-liked and well-respected. And then there was Elena. From the time she was young, everyone had expected her to shift early, the way most wolves in strong families did. Her older sister Mira had shifted at 12, right on schedule, her wolf a beautiful shade of brown that matched their father's. The whole pack had celebrated. There had been a small ceremony, gifts, congratulations from every corner of the territory. Elena remembered watching from the sidelines, 6 years old, already dreaming of her own shifting day, imagining the celebration that would surely come for her too. But her 12th birthday came and went with nothing. No warmth spreading through her limbs, no wolf clawing to get free, no transformation at all. Her parents told her not to worry, that everyone was different, that some wolves simply took longer. By 13, the whispers had started. By 14, other children her age had all shifted, and Elena remained the only one who had not. By 16, she had stopped attending pack gatherings whenever she could avoid them, tired of the stares and the questions and the pitying looks from adults who used to smile at her. She had tried everything the elders suggested. She had fasted for 3 days to weaken her human side. She had spent nights alone in the forest, hoping isolation would trigger her wolf. She had even tried the old remedies whispered about by pack elders, bitter herbs meant to unlock a stubborn spirit. Nothing worked. Her wolf, if it existed at all, stayed silent, buried somewhere she could not reach. Now, standing alone in the dark forest with tears streaming down her face, Elena wondered if Damien was right. Maybe she really was wolfless. Maybe there was nothing inside her waiting to emerge, and she had spent 6 years hoping for something that would never come. She sank down against the trunk of an old oak tree, pulling her knees to her chest, and let herself cry properly for the first time in years. She cried for the humiliation of tonight, for the years of quiet shame that had led to this moment, for the sister who would not meet her eyes and the parents who could not protect her. She cried until her body ached with it, until the forest around her blurred into shapes and shadows. She did not know how long she sat there before she heard footsteps approaching. She stiffened, wiping her face quickly, expecting her mother had finally caught up to her. But the figure that emerged from the trees was not her mother. "I thought you might come this way," said a voice she recognized instantly. Sophie Marlowe, one of the few pack members who had ever treated Elena with real kindness, stepped into the small clearing where Elena sat. Sophie was a few years older, already mated, with a gentle face and kind eyes that had never once looked at Elena with pity or scorn. "Please don't tell me it's going to be all right," Elena said, her voice hoarse from crying. "I don't think I can hear that right now." Sophie sat down beside her without hesitation, not seeming to care that the ground was cold and damp. "I wasn't going to say that. What Damien did tonight was cruel and unnecessary. There was no reason to humiliate you like that in front of everyone. He could have spoken to the elders quietly. He chose to make a spectacle of it instead." Elena stared at her hands. "Everyone already thinks I'm wolfless. Now they have proof, don't they?" The future alpha said it out loud. "The future alpha is a proud young man who cares too much about appearances," Sophie said, a hard edge entering her usually soft voice. "He has never once had to question who he is or where he belongs. It is easy to be cruel when you have never known what it feels like to be on the other side of it." They sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the forest settling around them, distant and calm compared to the chaos Elena had left behind. Somewhere an owl called out, and the wind moved gently through the leaves above. "Do you really think I'll never shift?" Elena finally asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Sophie was quiet for a long moment before she answered. I think there are things about this pack, about our history, that even the elders do not fully understand. I have heard old stories, the kind grandmothers tell children before bed, about wolves, whose spirits sleep longer than others, because they carry something different inside them. I do not know if those stories are true, but I know that you are not nothing, Elena, no matter what Damien says. And I know that pain, like what you felt tonight, does not simply disappear. Sometimes it changes a person, sometimes it wakes something up. Elena did not fully understand what Sophie meant, and in that moment, exhausted and raw from crying, she did not have the strength to ask. She simply nodded, grateful for the company, grateful that at least one person in the pack did not see her as an embarrassment. "Come back with me," Sophie said gently, rising to her feet and offering a hand. "You should not be alone in the woods tonight. There is talk of rogue wolves passing through the territory this season. It is not safe." Elena hesitated, but the thought of returning to the packlands, of possibly running into Damien, or facing more whispered judgment, made her stomach twist. "I need a little more time," she said. "I promise I'll be careful. I just need to breathe." Sophie studied her for a moment, clearly torn, but eventually nodded. "Do not go far, and do not stay out past midnight. Your mother will worry herself sick." After Sophie left, disappearing back through the trees toward the distant glow of the pack fire, Elena remained sitting against the oak tree, staring up at the patches of moonlight breaking through the canopy above. Her mind kept replaying the ceremony, Damien's voice, the laughter, the way the entire pack had looked at her like she was something broken, something less than whole. She thought about her sister Mira, who had not defended her, who had looked away when Elena needed her most. She thought about her parents, respected and well-liked, who had spent years quietly apologizing for a daughter they did not understand. She thought about every birthday that had passed without the transformation everyone expected, every year that pushed her further from the pack she had been born into. For the first time in a long while, Elena let herself feel something other than shame. Underneath the humiliation, underneath the hurt, something else was stirring, something sharper and hotter: anger. Real anger, the kind she had never allowed herself to feel before, always too busy trying to make herself smaller, trying to apologize for existing in a way that did not fit the pack's expectations. Why should she apologize for something she could not control? Why should she stand quietly while Damien humiliated her in front of hundreds of people, simply because he was proud and cruel and used to getting whatever he wanted? Why had she spent 6 years believing there was something wrong with her, when maybe, just maybe, the problem was not her at all? The anger built inside her chest, hot and unfamiliar, and Elena found herself rising to her feet without quite deciding to do so. She walked deeper into the forest, away from the distant firelight, away from the packlands entirely, her thoughts spinning too fast to follow any clear direction. She walked until the trees grew thicker and the moonlight grew dimmer, until she could no longer hear even the faintest echo of the ceremony behind her. Her heart pounded strangely in her chest, a rhythm she did not recognize, fast and heavy, almost painful. She pressed a hand against her ribs, startled by how hard it was beating, and for a moment she wondered if something was wrong with her, if the stress of the night had finally become too much for her body to handle. But this did not feel like panic. It felt like pressure building beneath her skin, like something enormous trying to fit into a space too small to hold it. Her vision blurred at the edges, and heat spread through her limbs so suddenly that she gasped and dropped to her knees on the forest floor. Something was happening. Something she had waited 6 long years for, and now that it was finally arriving, it did not feel gentle or celebratory the way she had always imagined. It felt like being torn apart from the inside, like her very bones were reshaping themselves beneath her skin. She cried out, gripping the dirt beneath her hands, unsure whether to be terrified or relieved. Whatever was happening to her, whatever had been sleeping inside her for 18 years, it was waking up now, in the middle of the dark forest, far from anyone who could see it. And as pain and heat and impossible pressure rolled through her body in waves, one thought rose clear above the chaos in Elena's mind. Damien was wrong. She was not wolfless. Something powerful had simply been waiting for the right moment to come alive, and that moment had finally arrived. Pain rolled through Elena's body in waves that seemed to have no end, and she pressed her forehead against the cold earth, gasping for breath that would not come easily. Her skin felt too tight, then too loose, then too tight again, as though her entire body could not decide what shape it wanted to hold. She had heard other pack members describe their first shift before, the ache in their bones, the strange stretching sensation along their spine, but nothing had prepared her for how violent it actually felt. She tried to focus on breathing, in and out, the way her mother had once taught her during a bad fever years ago. In through the nose, out through the mouth. But every breath came shallow and desperate, and her vision kept sliding in and out of focus, the moonlit forest around her bending and warping at the edges. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything went still. Elena blinked, disoriented, and realized the pain had stopped. Her body no longer ached. In fact, she felt stronger than she ever had in her life, every muscle humming with an energy she could not name. She tried to push herself up from the ground, and that was when she noticed her hands were no longer hands at all. Silver fur covered her paws, catching the moonlight in a way that made them almost glow. She froze, staring, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. She turned her head, an easy, fluid motion that felt completely natural despite being entirely new, and caught sight of her own reflection, in a small pool of rainwater, collected between two roots. The wolf staring back at her was not like any wolf she had ever seen in the pack. Its fur shimmered silver from nose to tail, unlike the browns and grays and blacks that made up every other wolf she knew. Its eyes glowed a pale, luminous color somewhere between blue and white, brighter than moonlight itself. Even in the dim reflection, Elena could tell this wolf was larger than a normal wolf her age should be, its shoulders broad and powerful, its whole frame radiating a strength that did not match the quiet, overlooked girl she had always been. She let out a sound, somewhere between a gasp and a whimper, and heard it come out as a low, rich howl instead of a human voice. The sound rolled through the trees, deep and clear, carrying farther than she expected, and for a moment she panicked, afraid someone from the pack might hear it and come to investigate. But nothing came. The forest remained quiet around her, the only movement the gentle sway of branches in the night breeze. Elena took a tentative step forward on four legs, stumbling slightly as she adjusted to this entirely new way of moving through the world. Her body responded with a grace she had never known, muscles coordinating in ways that felt instinctive despite having never done this before. She moved toward the water again, staring down at her reflection, trying to understand what she was looking at. This could not be her. This powerful, glowing creature could not possibly be the same wolfless girl who had been humiliated in front of the entire pack only hours ago. And yet, when she moved, the reflection moved with her, perfectly matched, undeniable. For a long time, Elena simply sat by the water, watching her reflection shift with every small movement of her head, trying to reconcile the image with everything she had believed about herself for the past 6 years. She had spent so long convinced that her wolf simply did not exist, that she carried some flaw deep inside her that prevented the transformation everyone else experienced so easily. Now here she was, not just an ordinary wolf, but something that looked almost otherworldly, silver and glowing under the moon. Slowly, cautiously, she began to explore her new body, testing the strength in her legs, the sharpness of her senses. The forest around her, which had always seemed dark and mysterious to her human eyes, now revealed itself in incredible detail. She could smell things she had never noticed before, the damp earth beneath the fallen leaves, the faint musk of a deer that had passed through hours earlier, the sharp scent of pine sap from a broken branch nearby. Her hearing picked up sounds from what felt like miles away, small rustling movements of nocturnal creatures going about their business, the distant murmur of a stream she had not even known was nearby. Everything felt sharper, clearer, more alive than her human senses had ever allowed. She understood, in that moment, why pack members spoke of their wolf forms with such reverence, why shifting was considered one of the most important milestones in a young wolf's life. This was not simply a different shape. This was an entirely different way of experiencing the world. Elena ran through the forest for what felt like hours, testing the limits of her new form, leaping over fallen logs, weaving between trees with an ease that would have been impossible for her human body. The exhaustion and pain of the ceremony seemed to melt away with every stride, replaced by something closer to freedom than she had ever known. For the first time in years, she was not thinking about Damien's cruel words or the pitying looks from her pack. She was simply moving, simply existing, simply being exactly what she had always secretly hoped she could become. But eventually, as the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, Elena knew she needed to find her way back. Her family would be frantic with worry by now, and she had no idea how to explain where she had been or what had happened to her in the darkness of the forest. Returning to her human form proved almost as strange as the first shift had been. She focused on the memory of her human body, on the feeling of standing on two legs, and slowly, with far less pain than before, her wolf form melted away, leaving her crouched naked in the cold morning air, her own two hands pressed against the damp earth. She had no clothes with her, having run from the ceremony still dressed in her formal gathering attire, which she now realized was probably scattered somewhere back near the clearing where her transformation had first begun. Shivering, Elena wrapped her arms around herself and began walking in the direction she believed would lead back toward Packlands, grateful at least that the early morning light provided enough visibility to navigate the forest paths. She found her discarded clothing not far from the oak tree where everything had started, torn in places from where her body had changed shape without warning. She dressed quickly, hands trembling from cold and lingering shock, and began the walk back toward the pack settlement, her mind racing with questions she had no answers for. What was she supposed to say when she arrived? How could she explain a transformation that had taken 6 years longer than everyone else's, and had somehow resulted in a wolf form, unlike anything she had ever seen described in pack history? Would people believe her at all, or would they assume she was lying, desperate for attention after the humiliation of the previous night? As she walked, Elena noticed something odd: small animals that crossed her path, rabbits and squirrels, and even a fox she startled from the underbrush. All froze completely still when they caught her scent, as though recognizing something significant about her presence. She had never experienced this kind of reaction from wildlife before, even as a human moving through the pack's territory. It was as though her very presence carried a weight she did not yet understand. The pack settlement came into view as the sun fully rose above the horizon, and Elena felt her stomach tighten with nerves. She could see figures already moving about the central clearing, some heading toward the training grounds, others tending to morning chores. She spotted her mother almost immediately, standing near the edge of the clearing with her arms wrapped tightly around herself, clearly having spent the entire night searching or waiting. "Elena!" Her mother's voice cracked with relief as she spotted her, rushing forward to pull her into a tight embrace. "Where have you been? I searched everywhere. Your father has half the trackers out looking for you right now." "I'm sorry," Elena said, her voice still hoarse from crying and howling both. "I needed to be alone. I didn't mean to worry everyone." Her mother pulled back, studying her face with a concerned expression. "You look different. Are you hurt? What happened out there?" Before Elena could figure out how to answer, a commotion near the pack's central longhouse drew both their attention. Several wolves stood clustered together, speaking in hushed, urgent tones, occasionally glancing toward the forest edge. Elena's stomach dropped as she realized they were looking in her direction. "What is it?" her mother asked, following her gaze. One of the trackers, an older man named Callum, who had worked alongside Elena's father for years, approached them cautiously, his eyes wide, with something between confusion and awe. "We found tracks," he said slowly. "Wolf tracks, leading from the ceremony grounds into the forest, and then back again this morning. Tracks unlike anything I have seen in this territory, larger than they should be, and marked strangely, almost silver in color where they pressed into the mud." Elena felt her heart begin to race. She had not considered that her wolf form would leave evidence behind, physical proof of what had happened to her in the darkness. "Silver tracks," her mother repeated slowly, turning to look at Elena, with an expression that mixed confusion, with something like dawning realization. "Elena, did something happen to you last night? Something more than just running off to be alone?" Elena opened her mouth, unsure how to explain, unsure whether she was ready for the entire pack to know what had happened, especially so soon after the humiliation of the previous evening. But before she could find the words, she noticed something that made her stomach drop even further. Several pack members near the longhouse had turned to stare directly at her, their expressions shifting from curiosity to something closer to shock. She realized, with a growing sense of dread and excitement combined, that she probably still carried the scent of her wolf form on her skin, something these experienced trackers and wolves would immediately recognize, even if she said nothing at all. "Elena," Callum said carefully, stepping closer and inhaling slightly, his eyes widening further. Your scent, it has changed completely since yesterday. The murmurs around the clearing grew louder, more pack members turning to look, some beginning to whisper to each other, casting glances between Elena and the forest edge, where the strange silver tracks had been discovered. Elena felt the same suffocating weight of attention she had felt at the ceremony the night before, except this time, instead of mockery and laughter, she saw confusion, curiosity, and in some faces, a flicker of something that looked almost like fear. Her mother reached out and gripped her hand tightly. Elena, please, tell me what happened. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the eyes of the gathering crowd pressing in around her, and realized there was no point in hiding it any longer. Whatever had happened to her in the forest, whatever strange and powerful thing had finally awakened inside her after 6 long years of waiting, it was about to become the entire pack's business whether she was ready or not. I shifted, she said quietly, then louder, so the growing crowd could hear. Last night, in the forest, I finally shifted. The clearing fell into stunned silence, broken only by the distant sound of birds beginning their morning songs, completely unaware of the storm of attention now gathering around the girl who, only hours before, had been called wolfless in front of the entire pack. Word spread through the pack settlement faster than fire through dry grass. By mid-morning, nearly every wolf in the Blackthorn territory had heard some version of the story, each retelling growing slightly more exaggerated than the last. Elena Whitmore, the girl everyone believed was wolfless, had finally shifted, and her wolf was unlike anything anyone had seen in living memory. Elena sat inside her family's home, her mother fussing over her with a cup of warm tea she had not touched, while her father paced back and forth near the window, glancing outside every few seconds, as though expecting a crowd to gather at their door at any moment. Mira, her sister, sat quietly in the corner, watching Elena with an expression that mixed guilt and curiosity in equal measure. You should have told us where you were going, her father said for what felt like the 10th time, though his voice had softened considerably from the panic of earlier that morning. We were terrified something had happened to you. I'm sorry, Elena said again, wrapping her hands around the warm cup just to have something to hold. I didn't plan any of this. I just needed to get away from everyone, and then it happened. Tell us again, her mother said gently, sitting down across from her. Tell us exactly what you saw, what you felt. Every detail matters. Elena took a deep breath and recounted the events as clearly as she could, from the pain that had gripped her body in the forest, to the strange silver reflection she had seen in the rainwater pool, to the incredible sharpness of her senses once the transformation completed. Her parents listened intently, exchanging occasional glances that Elena could not quite interpret. Silver, her father repeated once she finished, rubbing a hand over his jaw thoughtfully. I have never heard of a silver wolf in this pack's history. Not in my lifetime, not in my father's lifetime either. Could it mean something is wrong with her? Mira asked quietly, then immediately looked embarrassed by the question, glancing at Elena with an apologetic expression. I don't mean it like that. I just mean, is it dangerous? Different from a normal shift? I don't think it's dangerous, Elena said, though she honestly could not be certain. It felt incredible, actually. Stronger than anything I've ever felt as a human. Faster, sharper senses, more powerful muscles. If anything, it felt like more, not less. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation, sharp and urgent. Elena's father moved to answer it, and Elena immediately recognized the voice that followed, low and commanding, belonging to Alpha Gareth Blackthorn himself. I need to speak with Elena, the Alpha said, stepping into the small home without waiting for a formal invitation, his presence immediately filling the space with an authority that made everyone straighten slightly in their seats. The elders have called an emergency gathering. They wish to see this new wolf form for themselves. Elena's stomach twisted with anxiety. She had barely had time to process what happened to her, and now she was being summoned before the pack elders, the most respected and powerful members of their community, to somehow prove or explain something she did not fully understand herself. With respect, Alpha, her mother said carefully, rising to her feet. My daughter has been through an exhausting night. Perhaps she could rest first and speak with the elders later today or tomorrow. I understand your concern, Gareth said, his expression not unkind, though clearly firm. But word has already spread through the entire settlement. Trackers have found unusual signs throughout the northern forest, not just near the ceremony grounds. Other pack members claim to have heard an unfamiliar howl last night, one that carried farther and sounded different than any wolf they recognized. The elders believe this needs to be addressed quickly, before rumors spiral further out of control. Elena set down her tea, understanding that there was no reasonable way to refuse this request. "I'll go," she said quietly. "It's all right, Mother. I would rather explain what happened myself than have everyone build their own version of the story." Her mother looked as though she wanted to argue further, but eventually nodded, reaching out to squeeze Elena's hand supportively. "We will come with you." The walk to the elders' meeting hall felt like an eternity, made worse by the number of pack members who paused their morning activities to watch Elena pass, whispering to each other, some pointing openly at her. She kept her eyes forward, trying to ignore the weight of their attention, reminding herself that whatever they thought, whatever rumors had already begun circulating, she finally had proof that Damien had been wrong about her, wrong in the most public and undeniable way possible. The thought of Damien sent an unexpected jolt through her chest. She wondered if he had heard yet, if word of her transformation had reached him. Part of her, a part she was not entirely proud of, hoped he had. Hoped he felt even a fraction of the humiliation he had made her feel the night before. The elders' meeting hall was a large wooden structure near the center of the settlement, reserved for important pack business, and rarely used for anything less significant than major decisions affecting the entire community. As Elena approached, she saw a crowd had already gathered outside, kept at a respectful distance by several pack guards, but clearly eager to catch any information about what was happening inside. Inside, 5 elders sat along a raised wooden platform, each one ancient and weathered with decades of pack leadership behind them. Elena recognized most of them from occasional pack gatherings, though she had never had reason to speak with any of them directly before. Alpha Gareth took his place beside the platform, standing slightly apart from the elders themselves, his presence a bridge between their authority and the pack's daily leadership. "Elena Whitmore," said the eldest of the group, a woman named Agatha, whose silver hair and lined face carried an air of deep wisdom, accumulated over many decades. "We have heard remarkable claims about you this morning. Tell us, in your own words, what happened to you last night." Elena repeated her story once more, feeling increasingly like she was reciting a script, rather than describing one of the most significant experiences of her life. The elders listened without interruption, occasionally exchanging glances with each other that seemed to carry unspoken meaning. "You say your wolf form appeared silver," Agatha said once Elena finished. "Can you describe this more precisely? The exact shade, the pattern of the fur, anything unusual about the eyes, or the size of the creature?" Elena did her best to describe everything she remembered, the shimmering quality of the fur that seemed to catch light even in darkness, the pale glowing eyes somewhere between blue and white, the size that felt noticeably larger than what she understood to be typical for a first shift. As she spoke, she noticed the elders growing increasingly serious, their expressions shifting from simple curiosity to something closer to concern, or perhaps recognition. Agatha exchanged a long look with the elder beside her, an older man named Edmund, who had remained silent throughout the questioning. "Is something wrong?" Elena asked, unable to hide the anxiety creeping into her voice. "Have you seen a wolf like this before?" Edmund cleared his throat before speaking, his voice rough with age but carrying clearly through the hall. "There are old stories," he began slowly, "passed down through many generations of elders, about a bloodline that once ran through this pack many centuries ago. Wolves whose spirits carried the mark of the first wolves, the original guardians said to have founded packs like ours, when the world was still young and untamed." Elena felt a chill run through her, despite the warmth of the hall. "The first wolves?" "Legends," Agatha said, though her tone suggested she did not entirely dismiss them as mere stories. "According to the oldest tales, these guardian bloodlines would occasionally reappear generations later, dormant within descendants who showed no obvious sign of their heritage until circumstances forced the spirit to awaken. The stories describe these wolves exactly as you have described your own transformation: silver fur, eyes that glow with an unnatural light, strength and senses far beyond an ordinary wolf." The hall fell silent, as the weight of this information settled over everyone present. Elena struggled to process what she was hearing. 6 years of believing she was wolfless, of being called broken and lesser by everyone around her, And now these elders were suggesting she might carry the blood of legendary guardian wolves from the pack's earliest history. Why now? Alpha Gareth finally spoke, stepping forward with a skeptical expression. If this bloodline exists within her, why wait 18 years to manifest? Why not shift alongside her peers, like every other wolf in this pack? The old stories suggest these dormant bloodlines only awaken under conditions of extreme emotional strain, Edmund said, his eyes moving toward Elena with something that looked almost like sympathy. Great pain, great humiliation, moments that push a spirit to its absolute limit. Perhaps young Elena's wolf was simply waiting for the right circumstance to finally break free. Elena thought immediately of the ceremony, of Damien's cruel words ringing across the clearing, of the humiliation that had driven her running into the forest in the first place. If these old legends held any truth, then in a strange and bitter way, Damien's cruelty might have been the very thing that finally unlocked the power he had insisted she did not possess. "This is nothing but old folklore," Gareth said, though his voice carried less certainty than his words suggested. "We cannot make decisions based on grandmother's tales told to frighten children." "Perhaps not," Agatha said calmly. "But folklore or not, we cannot deny what several trackers and pack members have already witnessed this morning. Unusual tracks, an unfamiliar howl. A young woman whose scent has completely transformed overnight, and whose description of her wolf form matches ancient legends with remarkable precision. Something significant has happened here, Alpha, whether we choose to call it legend or simply an unexplained phenomenon." Gareth's jaw tightened, and Elena could see him struggling with something, perhaps the political implications of what this discovery might mean for pack hierarchy, perhaps genuine uncertainty about how to handle a situation with no clear precedent. "What do you propose we do?" "We should see this wolf form for ourselves," Edmund said. "Before we draw any further conclusions, before rumors and speculation spread even further through the settlement, we need direct confirmation of what Elena has described." All eyes turned toward Elena, waiting for her response. She swallowed hard, suddenly aware that she was being asked to transform in front of 5 pack elders, and the Alpha himself, a request that carried enormous weight, given everything that had already happened over the past 24 hours. "I have only shifted once," she admitted. "I don't know if I can do it again, not on command like this." "Try," Agatha said gently. "We do not expect perfection, only your best effort. This is important, Elena. More important than perhaps you realize." Elena closed her eyes, trying to remember the sensation from the night before, the pressure building beneath her skin, the heat spreading through her limbs. She focused on that feeling, willing it to return, and slowly, gradually, she felt something stir deep within her chest, a warmth that began to spread outward. The transformation happened more smoothly this time, though still not without discomfort, her body reshaping itself with a series of quick, fluid movements that left her standing on 4 paws once again, silver fur catching the light filtering through the hall's windows. The reaction from everyone present was immediate and unmistakable. Several elders rose from their seats, their expressions shifting into open awe. Even Alpha Gareth, who had approached the entire situation with visible skepticism, took an involuntary step backward, his eyes widening as he took in the sight before him. "By the ancestors," Agatha whispered, pressing a hand to her chest. "It is exactly as the old stories describe." Elena stood still, allowing them to observe her fully, feeling a strange mixture of vulnerability and pride under their scrutiny. This was the same wolf that had run free through the forest last night, the same creature that had made her feel, for the first time in years, powerful and whole, rather than broken and lacking. Edmund stepped closer, moving slowly and respectfully, studying her with careful attention. The size, the coloring, even the way she carries herself, it all matches the descriptions passed down through generations. "Alpha, I believe we may be witnessing something that has not occurred in this pack for many centuries." Gareth remained silent for a long moment, studying Elena's wolf form with an expression that had shifted from skepticism to something far more complicated, calculation mixed with genuine surprise. "If this bloodline is truly as old and significant as the legends suggest," he finally said, "then we have a great deal to discuss, and quickly, before this news spreads any further beyond our control." Elena shifted back to her human form, feeling suddenly exposed and exhausted, the weight of everything that had happened over the past day, finally settling over her like a heavy blanket. She wrapped her arms around herself, aware that her life had just changed in ways she could not yet fully comprehend. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Agatha stepped down from the platform, approaching Elena with a gentleness that felt almost maternal. "Now, child, we begin to understand exactly what you have become, and what that means for you, and for this entire pack." Outside the hall, Elena could hear the murmur of the gathered crowd growing louder, curiosity and speculation building with every passing minute. Whatever peace and anonymity she had known before last night's ceremony was already gone, replaced by something far more complicated and far more powerful than she had ever imagined possible. News of Elena's confirmed transformation swept through the Blackthorn pack within hours, reaching every corner of the settlement and beyond into the surrounding territories, where allied packs occasionally exchanged information. By the time evening fell, the small dirt paths between homes were filled with pack members gathering in tight clusters, speaking in hushed, excited tones about the girl who had been called Wolfless only a day earlier. Elena remained in her family's home, unwilling to face the crowds that had begun forming near her doorway throughout the afternoon. Her mother had eventually asked several pack guards to maintain a respectful distance, giving the family at least some privacy to process everything that had happened. Elena sat by the window, watching shadows move across the settlement, feeling strangely disconnected from the excitement building outside. "You should eat something," her mother said, setting a plate of food on the small table beside her. "You barely touched your breakfast, and you have had no lunch at all." "I'm not hungry," Elena admitted, though she picked at the food anyway, more to please her mother than out of any real appetite. Her mind kept circling back to the same unanswered questions. What did this transformation truly mean for her future? Would the pack that had mocked her for 6 years suddenly expect her to step into some position of importance she had never asked for, or prepared herself to hold? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts, and her father opened the door to find Sophie standing outside, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. "I heard everything," Sophie said, stepping inside once invited. "The entire settlement is talking about nothing else. Elena, are you all right? This must be overwhelming." "I don't even know what I am anymore," Elena admitted, finally voicing the confusion that had been building inside her all day. "This morning, I woke up as the same girl everyone mocked at the ceremony, and now the elders are talking about ancient bloodlines and guardian spirits, like I'm suddenly someone completely different." Sophie sat down across from her, reaching out to take her hand. "You are the same person you have always been, Elena. This transformation does not erase who you are, or what you have felt these past years. It simply reveals something that was always inside you, waiting for the right moment." "Have you heard anything about Damien?" Elena asked, unable to keep the question from slipping out, though she immediately felt foolish for asking. Sophie's expression shifted slightly, something careful entering her eyes. "He has been quiet since this morning. I heard he was in his father's study for most of the day, and no one has seen him venture out into the settlement since the news broke. I imagine he is having a difficult time processing what happened, given everything he said last night." Elena felt a complicated mixture of emotions at this news, satisfaction that Damien was experiencing some measure of discomfort after his cruelty, but also an unexpected pang of something closer to uncertainty about how their relationship, or whatever remained of it after his public rejection, would proceed from here. Before Elena could dwell further on the topic, another knock sounded at the door, this one more formal and insistent. Her father answered, and his posture straightened immediately upon seeing who stood outside. Alpha Gareth stood in the doorway once again, though this time he was accompanied by 2 of the elders from earlier that day, Agatha and Edmund, both wearing expressions of careful seriousness. "May we speak with Elena again?" Gareth asked, his tone notably more respectful than it had been even that morning. "There are matters we need to discuss regarding what this transformation means, both for her and for the pack as a whole." Elena's parents exchanged uncertain glances, but eventually stepped aside, allowing the 3 visitors into their modest home. The small living space suddenly felt crowded with the presence of such important pack figures, and Elena found herself sitting straighter, bracing for whatever conversation was about to unfold. "We have spent the day researching pack records and speaking with the oldest members of our community," Agatha began, taking a seat across from Elena with careful movements befitting her advanced age. "What we have discovered only confirms what we suspected earlier today. The bloodline you carry, Elena, traces back to the very founding of this pack, many generations before any of us were born. The first wolves, Elena said quietly, remembering the term Edmund had used earlier. Precisely, Edmund confirmed, nodding. According to our oldest records, the Blackthorn Pack was originally founded by a small group of wolves who possessed extraordinary abilities, strength, and senses, far beyond what became typical among later generations. As centuries passed, and the bloodline mixed with other wolves who joined the pack, these extraordinary traits became increasingly diluted, appearing less and less frequently, until they eventually seemed to disappear entirely from living memory. But the blood never truly vanished, Agatha added. It simply became dormant, hidden within certain family lines, waiting for the right combination of circumstances to reawaken. You, Elena, appear to be the first descendant in many generations to carry this dormant bloodline strongly enough for it to fully manifest. Elena absorbed this information slowly, trying to reconcile the image of herself as some kind of legendary bloodline carrier with the reality of who she had always understood herself to be, an overlooked, mocked, seemingly ordinary girl who had struggled for years with something everyone else considered simple and natural. What does this mean, practically speaking? Her father asked, his protective instincts clearly engaged despite the respectful presence of pack leadership in his home. What will be expected of Elena now? Gareth stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. That is precisely what we need to discuss. Pack law has always placed significant weight on bloodline and inherited strength when determining leadership succession. If Elena truly carries the blood of the first wolves, awakened and confirmed as we witness today, this could have significant implications for pack hierarchy going forward. You mean people will expect her to lead, Sophie said, her voice carrying a note of protective concern for her friend. That seems like an enormous burden to place on someone who only shifted for the first time last night. No one is suggesting immediate changes to leadership, Gareth said quickly. But pack members will naturally begin looking to Elena differently now, and we cannot ignore the political reality of what this transformation represents. Wolves respect strength and ancient bloodlines. There will be those who see Elena's awakening as significant, even if we ourselves are still working to understand its full implications. Elena felt a familiar knot of anxiety forming in her stomach, though this time it stemmed from an entirely different source than the humiliation she had felt at the ceremony. Instead of being dismissed and overlooked, she now faced the opposite problem: sudden and overwhelming attention and expectation, based on a transformation she barely understood herself. I never asked for any of this, she said quietly. I just wanted my wolf to finally arrive, like everyone else has had. I never wanted to become the center of some prophecy or political situation. Agatha's expression softened with genuine sympathy. I understand this feels overwhelming, child, but sometimes the paths our lives take are not the ones we would have chosen for ourselves. What matters now is how you choose to move forward, given what has already happened.
What would you suggest?
Elena's mother asked, clearly trying to find some practical path through the complicated situation unfolding around her daughter. For now, Edmund said, we suggest allowing Elena time to adjust to her new abilities, to practice controlling her transformation, and understanding the strength that comes with this bloodline. The elders will continue researching what we can find about the first wolves, and what their reappearance might mean for our pack's future. In the meantime, we ask that Elena remain available for further discussion as our understanding develops. Gareth cleared his throat, his expression turning slightly more serious. There is one more matter we must address. Given what has happened, given the public nature of Damien's rejection last night followed by this significant revelation today, there will inevitably be talk throughout the pack about the original claiming ceremony pairing. Some may argue the pairing should be reconsidered given this new information. Elena felt her face flush at the mention of Damien, uncertain what to make of the implication behind Gareth's words. I don't think Damien would want anything to do with me, regardless of what my wolf looks like, she said. He made his feelings very clear last night. Perhaps, Gareth said carefully, though circumstances have changed considerably since then. I cannot speak for my son's feelings, but I can tell you that pack politics rarely remain static for long, especially following an event as significant as what occurred today. After the visitors finally departed, leaving Elena's family alone once again in their small home, Elena found herself sitting quietly by the window, staring out at the darkening settlement, her mind spinning with everything that had been discussed. The weight of expectation now pressing down on her felt almost as heavy as the humiliation she had carried the night before, though this new burden came wrapped in unfamiliar layers of respect and curiosity rather than mockery. "You look troubled," her mother said, sitting down beside her. "Everyone expects something from me now," Elena said. "Yesterday I was nothing to this pack, invisible and overlooked. Today I'm suddenly connected to ancient bloodlines and pack politics I never asked to be part of. I don't know how to be whatever it is they think I am becoming." Her mother reached out, brushing a strand of hair back from Elena's face, with the same gentle affection she had shown throughout Elena's entire childhood. "You do not have to become anything other than yourself, Elena. Whatever bloodline runs through your veins, whatever power your wolf carries, none of that changes the person you have always been. Kind, patient, stronger than anyone gave you credit for, even before last night." Elena leaned into her mother's embrace, grateful for a moment of comfort amid the chaos of the past 2 days. Outside, the settlement continued its excited murmuring, pack members still processing the incredible turn of events that had transformed the wolfless girl from the ceremony into something far more significant than anyone had expected. Elena knew, deep down, that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new expectations, and perhaps new confrontations with the very people who had humiliated her only a day before. But for tonight at least, she allowed herself the simple comfort of her mother's presence, holding on to the last quiet moments before her entirely new life truly began. Morning arrived with a strange kind of tension hanging over the Blackthorn settlement. Elena woke early, her body still adjusting to whatever changes her transformation had brought, her senses sharper than usual even in her human form, as though the boundary between her two selves had grown thinner overnight. She dressed quickly and stepped outside, immediately aware of the eyes that turned toward her from across the settlement. Where once pack members had looked away from her in embarrassment or pity, now they watched openly, some with curiosity, others with something closer to reverence. Elena found the change almost more unsettling than the mockery she had endured for years. At least mockery had been familiar. This new attention felt like standing on unsteady ground, uncertain which direction it might shift next. She had agreed to meet Sophie near the training grounds that morning, hoping physical activity might help settle the restless energy that had kept her awake through most of the night. As she walked through the settlement, she noticed clusters of younger pack members watching her pass, whispering excitedly to each other, while older members offered respectful nods that would have been unthinkable just 2 days earlier. "There she is," she heard one voice murmur as she passed a group near the well. "The Silver Wolf." The nickname sent an odd shiver through her chest, part discomfort, part something she could not quite name. She had spent so long trying to remain invisible within the pack, and now she carried a title that made her impossible to overlook. Sophie waited near the edge of the training grounds, offering a warm smile as Elena approached. "How are you feeling this morning? I imagine sleep did not come easily." "Not particularly," Elena admitted. "Everything still feels strange, like I'm walking around in someone else's life." "That will pass with time," Sophie said reassuringly. "Give yourself room to adjust. This is an enormous change, even if it is one you always secretly hoped for." They walked together along the perimeter of the training grounds, where several pack members practiced combat forms and endurance drills under the watchful eye of instructors. Elena had always avoided this area in the past, uncomfortable being surrounded by wolves who trained and sparred with an ease she had never possessed. Today, however, several instructors paused their sessions to watch her pass, their expressions curious rather than dismissive. "Elena." A familiar voice called out from across the grounds, and Elena's stomach tightened as she turned to see Mira approaching, her sister's expression uncertain, almost nervous. "Mira," Elena said carefully, unsure what to expect after her sister's silence during the ceremony 2 nights earlier. "Can we talk?" Mira asked, glancing briefly at Sophie before returning her attention to Elena. "Just for a few minutes?" Sophie offered a understanding nod. "I'll give you two some space. Find me near the eastern fence when you're finished." Once Sophie had walked a respectful distance away, Mira shifted her weight nervously, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I owe you an apology," she finally said. "For the ceremony, for not standing up for you when Damien said those horrible things. I should have said something. I should have defended you." Elena felt a complicated mixture of emotions rising within her. old hurt mixing uncomfortably with a desire to move past the pain of that night. "Why didn't you?" she asked, unable to keep a slight edge from entering her voice. "You're my sister. I needed someone to be on my side. And you just looked away." Mira's eyes filled with tears, and she wrapped her arms around herself, looking younger and more vulnerable than Elena had seen her in years. "I was scared," she admitted. "Damien is the future alpha. Speaking against him in front of the entire pack, in front of his father, it felt impossible. I told myself I would apologize to you privately, that it would be enough. But watching you run into that crowd, seeing how humiliated you looked, I knew I had failed you as a sister." Elena studied her sister's face, seeing genuine remorse there, alongside the fear and social pressure that had shaped her silence during the ceremony. She thought about her own struggles over the years, the loneliness of feeling different from everyone around her, and found she did not have the energy to hold on to anger that would only deepen the distance already existing between them. "I forgive you," Elena said finally, though the words came with effort. "But I need you to understand how much that moment hurt me. Not just Damien's cruelty, but feeling like even my own family wouldn't stand beside me." "I understand," Mira said, wiping at her eyes. "And I promise, whatever happens from here, whatever this transformation means for you, I will not stay silent again. You deserve so much better than what happened that night." The sisters embraced, and Elena felt some of the tension that had built between them over the years begin to ease, replaced by a fragile but genuine reconnection that she hoped might continue growing stronger in the days ahead. As they separated, Elena noticed movement near the edge of the training grounds and felt her breath catch as she recognized Damien standing there, watching the exchange between the sisters with an unreadable expression. He had clearly witnessed at least part of their conversation, and Elena felt a fresh wave of discomfort at his presence. Mira followed her gaze and stiffened slightly. "Do you want me to stay?" she asked quietly. "No," Elena said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "I think I need to speak with him alone." Mira hesitated, then nodded, offering Elena's hand a final squeeze before walking away, leaving Elena standing alone as Damien approached slowly across the training grounds. Several pack members nearby paused their activities, clearly sensing the significance of this particular meeting, though they maintained a respectful distance. "Elena," Damien said once he stood close enough to speak without shouting, his voice notably different from the cold, dismissive tone he had used during the ceremony. Something in his expression seemed uncertain, almost hesitant, quite unlike the confident young man who had humiliated her so publicly. "Damien." She kept her voice carefully neutral, unwilling to let him see how much his presence still affected her, even now. "I heard about your transformation," he said, his eyes searching her face, as though trying to reconcile the girl standing before him with everything he had said about her 2 nights earlier. "Everyone is talking about it." "I'm aware," Elena said dryly. "It's difficult to miss, given how much attention I've received since yesterday morning." Damien shifted uncomfortably, clearly struggling with something he wanted to say. "What happened at the ceremony?" he began slowly. "The things I said to you, in front of everyone, that was wrong of me. I should not have spoken to you that way, regardless of what I believed about your wolf." Elena studied him carefully, trying to determine whether this apology stemmed from genuine remorse or simply from the changed political reality now surrounding her. "Would you be standing here apologizing if my wolf had never appeared? If I had remained wolfless, exactly as you assumed?" The question hung in the air between them, and Elena watched Damien's expression flicker with something like shame as he processed the implications of what she was really asking. "I would like to say yes," he admitted finally, his honesty surprising her slightly. "But I cannot be certain that is true. I have been thinking about this constantly since yesterday, trying to understand my own reaction to everything that happened. I was cruel to you, Elena, regardless of the reasons behind my behavior, and I am ashamed of how I acted, especially in front of the entire pack. Your apology means very little if it only arrives because I suddenly have power you respect," Elena said, keeping her voice steady despite the emotion building beneath her words. "For 6 years, I was mocked and dismissed by this entire pack, including you, long before that ceremony. Where was your concern for my feelings then, when I was simply the wolfless girl everyone overlooked?" Damien had no immediate answer, and Elena watched something shift in his expression, perhaps genuine self-reflection breaking through his usual confidence. "You're right," he finally said quietly. "I have no excuse for how I treated you, not just at the ceremony, but for years before that as well. I allowed myself to view you the way everyone else did, without ever questioning whether that judgment was fair or kind." Elena felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and lingering hurt at hearing him finally acknowledge his behavior so directly. Part of her wanted to accept his apology immediately, to move past the pain of the ceremony and find some kind of resolution. But a larger part remembered too clearly the humiliation of standing in that circle, hearing him call her wolfless, in front of everyone she had ever known. "I appreciate you saying this," she said finally, "but I need time before I can decide what, if anything, comes next between us. You hurt me deeply, Damien, and an apology, however sincere, does not simply erase that pain." Damien nodded slowly, seeming to accept this response with more grace than Elena had expected. "That is fair," he said. "Take whatever time you need. I only wanted you to know that I recognize how wrong I was, regardless of what happens between us going forward." As he turned to walk away, Elena felt a complicated tangle of emotions settling in her chest, relief mixed with lingering anger, uncertainty mixed with a strange hope she was not entirely ready to acknowledge. Whatever came next, she knew that her relationship with Damien, and with the entire pack that had watched her transformation unfold, would never return to what it had been before the ceremony that changed everything. She made her way toward the eastern fence where Sophie waited, her mind still processing the exchange that had just occurred. As she walked, she caught sight of her own reflection in a nearby window, and for a moment, barely a flicker, she thought she saw a hint of silver shimmering beneath her normal brown eyes, as though her wolf remained closer to the surface now than it had ever been before, watching, waiting, ready to emerge again whenever circumstances demanded it. 3 weeks passed since the night of the claiming ceremony, and Elena found herself slowly settling into a routine that felt entirely different from the quiet, overlooked existence she had known before. Each morning, she trained with a small group of elders and experienced fighters who had volunteered to help her understand the strength and abilities that came with her newly awakened bloodline. Her body, once considered weak and unremarkable, now demonstrated speed and power that regularly surprised even her most seasoned instructors. "Again," called out Marcus, one of the pack's most respected combat trainers, as Elena circled him cautiously across the training grounds. "Do not hold back this time. I want to see what your wolf can truly do." Elena nodded, feeling the familiar warmth building beneath her skin as she allowed her transformation to begin. The process had grown noticeably smoother with practice, the pain from that first agonizing night in the forest replaced by a sensation closer to controlled release, as though her body finally understood how to properly channel the power that had waited so long to emerge. Her silver wolf form settled into the training grounds, muscles coiled and ready, and she launched herself toward Marcus with a speed that made several onlookers gasp audibly. Marcus, despite his considerable experience, barely managed to dodge her attack, rolling away and springing back to his feet with visible effort. "Impressive," he said, breathing slightly harder than usual, respect clear in his voice. "Your reflexes continue to improve every single session. I have trained wolves for over 20 years, Elena, and I have never seen anyone progress this quickly." Elena shifted back to her human form, accepting a towel from a nearby pack member with a small, proud smile. The praise still felt unfamiliar after years of criticism and dismissal, but she found herself growing more comfortable with each passing day, allowing herself to actually enjoy her newfound strength, rather than constantly questioning whether she deserved it. As training concluded for the morning, Elena noticed Sophie approaching with an expression that suggested important news. "The elders have finished their research," Sophie said without preamble. "They are calling another gathering this afternoon. Apparently they have discovered something significant about the history of your bloodline." Elena felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. The weeks since her transformation had brought a steady stream of revelations about the ancient first wolves and their connection to the pack's founding, each discovery adding new layers of complexity to her understanding of what she had become. "Did they say what they found?" "Only that it involves the pack's founding legends more directly than anything discovered so far," Sophie said. "Agatha specifically requested that you attend, along with your family." That afternoon, Elena once again found herself standing before the Elders' Council, her parents and Mira seated beside her, the atmosphere in the meeting hall notably more formal than her previous visits had been. Alpha Gareth stood near the platform, his expression carrying the weight of significant news yet to be shared. "We have spent considerable time researching our oldest pack records," Agatha began, addressing the gathered group with her usual measured authority. "Records that predate even the earliest written histories most pack members are familiar with, preserved through oral tradition and passed down through generations of elder councils." Edmund stepped forward, holding an ancient, weathered piece of parchment that looked as though it might crumble at the slightest mishandling. "According to these records, the Blackthorn pack was not simply founded by wolves possessing extraordinary strength, as we previously believed. The first wolves were considered guardians, chosen specifically to protect this territory from threats that no ordinary wolf could handle alone." "What kind of threats?" Elena's father asked, his protective instincts clearly engaged by the ominous implication behind Edmund's words. "The records are not entirely clear," Agatha admitted. "Much of the original context has been lost over the centuries, deliberately obscured by early pack leaders, who feared the knowledge might attract unwanted attention if it fell into the wrong hands. But the pattern is consistent across multiple historical accounts. The first wolves emerged during times of significant danger, their extraordinary abilities awakening, specifically because the pack needed protection beyond what ordinary wolves could provide." Elena felt a chill settle over her despite the warm afternoon sunlight filtering through the hall's windows. "Are you suggesting my wolf awakened because some kind of danger is approaching?" "We cannot say with certainty," Edmund said carefully. "The timing of your awakening could simply be coincidental, triggered purely by the emotional circumstances of the ceremony, exactly as we initially believed. However, we would be remiss not to consider the alternative possibility, that your transformation signals something the pack needs to prepare for." Gareth stepped forward, his expression grave. "We have already begun increasing patrols along our territorial borders as a precaution. Several trackers have reported unusual signs in recent days, unfamiliar scents crossing into our lands from the northern territories, movements that suggest wolves not native to our pack may be scouting our borders." "Rogue wolves?" Mira asked, her voice tight with concern. "Possibly," Gareth said, "or something else entirely. We simply do not know yet. But given everything the elders have discovered about Elena's bloodline, and the historical patterns surrounding the first wolf's emergence, I believe we would be foolish to dismiss the possibility that these events are connected." Elena absorbed this information slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility settling over her shoulders in a way that felt both terrifying and, in some strange way, purposeful. For years, she had felt useless to her pack, invisible and overlooked, contributing nothing of value to the community that had raised her. Now she was being told that her very existence might be connected to the pack's protection during a time of potential danger. "What do you need from me?" she asked, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. Agatha's expression softened with something like pride. "For now, simply continue your training. Strengthen your control over your transformation. Build your physical capabilities alongside our most experienced fighters. If danger truly is approaching, this pack will need every advantage available to us, and your bloodline may prove more valuable than we can currently imagine." As the meeting concluded and Elena's family made their way back toward their home, she found herself walking slightly apart from the others, lost in thought about everything she had just learned. The idea that she might be destined for something larger than herself, some role tied to ancient guardian legends, and the pack's very survival, felt overwhelming in ways that even her recent transformation had not quite prepared her for. "You seem troubled," her father said, falling into step beside her, his expression carrying the same protective concern he had shown throughout her entire childhood. "It's a lot to process," Elena admitted. "First I learn I carry some ancient guardian bloodline, and now I'm told that bloodline might have awakened specifically because the pack faces some unknown danger. It feels like an enormous weight to carry, especially after spending years feeling like I couldn't contribute anything meaningful to this community at all." Her father was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully before speaking. "You know, Elena, I never once believed you were truly wolfless, not in the way others suggested. I always sensed something different about you, something waiting beneath the surface. I simply never imagined it would turn out to be something quite this significant." Elena smiled slightly, grateful for her father's quiet faith even during the years when doubt and mockery had surrounded her from every other direction. "Thank you for never giving up on me," she said. "Always," he replied firmly. "Whatever comes next, whatever this bloodline truly means for you and for our pack, know that your family stands behind you completely. You do not have to face any of this alone." As they continued walking toward home, Elena noticed a figure standing near the edge of the training grounds, watching their approach with an expression she was beginning to recognize as characteristic of the changed Damien she had encountered several times over the past 3 weeks. Their conversations since that first apology had remained cautious but increasingly frequent, each meeting slowly chipping away at the wall of hurt and mistrust that had built between them. "I heard about the elders' meeting," Damien said as Elena's family passed, though his eyes remained fixed primarily on her. "Is everything all right?" Elena hesitated, uncertain how much to share, though something in his genuine concern encouraged her to answer honestly. "The elders believe my transformation might be connected to some approaching danger. They've increased border patrols because of unusual activity along our territorial lines." Damien's expression shifted immediately to something more serious, his protective instincts as future pack leader clearly engaging with the news. "I had not heard the full extent of what they discovered. My father mentioned increased patrols, but not the connection to your bloodline specifically." "Neither had I, until this afternoon," Elena admitted. "Whatever comes," Damien said, his voice carrying an unexpected intensity, "this pack will face it together. And you will not be facing it alone, Elena. I promise you that." Elena studied his face, searching for any hint of the cruel dismissiveness that had once defined his treatment of her, finding instead genuine concern and something that looked increasingly like respect, perhaps even something warmer beginning to grow beneath the careful boundaries they had maintained since his apology weeks earlier. "Thank you," she said quietly, and for the first time since the humiliation of that ceremony, she found herself believing that whatever challenges lay ahead, she might actually have the strength and the support needed to face them. The warning signs the elders had feared arrived faster than anyone in the Blackthorn pack anticipated. Less than a week after the meeting where Elena learned about the possible connection between her bloodline and approaching danger, a tracker named Owen burst into the settlement at dawn, his clothes torn and his breathing ragged from a desperate run through the forest. "Wolves," he gasped out to the guards who rushed to meet him. "Unknown wolves, at least a dozen, moving along our northern border. They are not simply passing through, they are testing our defenses." Word spread through the settlement with alarming speed, and within the hour, Alpha Gareth had called together every capable fighter in the pack, Elena included, to discuss how they should respond to this direct threat to their territory. Elena stood among the assembled wolves, feeling the nervous energy radiating from everyone around her, understanding that whatever training she had completed over the past weeks was about to face its first real test. "These wolves belong to no pack we recognize," Gareth announced to the gathered group, his expression grim, as he studied a rough map of their territory spread across a wooden table. "Our trackers report unusual markings, scars that suggest deliberate combat training, rather than natural pack conflicts. This is not a random incursion. Someone has organized these wolves with clear purpose." "What do they want?" Mira asked from beside Elena, her voice tight with fear despite her training. "We do not yet know," Gareth admitted. "But their movements along our border, combined with the timing of Elena's awakening, and the ancient legends surrounding the first wolves, suggests this may not be coincidental. Whatever the connection, we must prepare for the possibility of direct conflict." Elena felt Damien's presence beside her before she saw him, his expression focused and serious as he studied the map alongside his father. "I want to lead a scouting party to assess their numbers and intentions before we commit to any larger action," he said. "We cannot afford to react blindly to a threat we do not fully understand." "I want to go with him," Elena said, surprising herself with how quickly the words left her mouth. Every head in the room turned toward her, and she felt her cheeks flush slightly under the sudden attention, though she did not retract her request. "Elena," her father began, concern evident in his voice, "you have only been training for a few weeks. This could be extremely dangerous." "I understand the risk," Elena said, meeting her father's eyes steadily. "But if these wolves are truly connected to why my bloodline awakened, then I may be able to sense or understand something about them that others cannot." I cannot simply hide at home while this pack faces a threat that might be tied directly to me. Gareth studied her for a long moment, weighing her request against the obvious risks involved. Very well, he finally said. Damien, take Elena, and no more than 3 others. Move quietly, observe only, and return immediately if you encounter any direct confrontation. We need information, not casualties. The scouting party assembled quickly, Damien leading Elena alongside 2 experienced trackers, named Callum, and a younger fighter named Felix. They moved through the forest with careful precision, staying low and quiet as they approached the northern border, where Owen had reported the unusual wolf activity. As they drew closer to the border, Elena felt something strange stirring within her, a prickling awareness along her skin that seemed to intensify with every step forward. She paused, causing the others to stop as well, Damien glancing back at her with a questioning expression. Something's wrong, Elena whispered. I can feel it, like a pressure building in the air around us. Callum sniffed the air cautiously, his experienced tracker senses picking up something that made his expression darken. She's right. There's an unfamiliar scent here, something I don't recognize from any pack I've encountered in my years of tracking. They continued forward more cautiously, and soon the trees began to thin, revealing a clearing where a group of unfamiliar wolves had gathered, exactly as Owen had reported. Elena counted quickly, spotting at least a dozen wolves moving with disciplined coordination that immediately confirmed Gareth's suspicion about deliberate military training rather than random pack behavior. At the center of the group stood a particularly large wolf, dark-furred with a jagged scar running across its muzzle, clearly serving as some kind of leader, based on how the others deferred to its movements. As Elena watched, the leader wolf suddenly went completely still, its head turning sharply in their direction despite the considerable distance and the careful concealment the scouting party had maintained. They've sensed us, Damien whispered urgently. We need to retreat, now. But before they could begin moving back through the trees, the leader wolf let out a sharp, commanding howl that immediately drew the attention of every other wolf in the clearing. Elena felt her heart pound as the pack began moving in their direction with alarming speed, clearly having detected their presence despite their careful precautions. Run, Damien commanded, and the scouting party began retreating through the forest as quickly as possible, though Elena could hear the unfamiliar wolves gaining ground behind them with frightening efficiency. They're too fast, Felix called out, panic evident in his voice. We won't make it back to the settlement before they catch us. Elena felt the familiar warmth building beneath her skin, her body instinctively responding to the danger surrounding them. Without fully deciding to do so, she allowed her transformation to take hold, her silver wolf form emerging in a burst of speed that left the others momentarily startled. Elena, wait, Damien called out, but she was already moving, positioning herself between the fleeing scouting party and the pursuing wolves, understanding instinctively that her superior speed and strength might be the only thing capable of buying the others enough time to reach safety. The lead wolf with the scarred muzzle broke away from its pack, charging directly toward Elena with obvious intent to eliminate the threat she now posed to their pursuit. Elena felt fear rising in her chest, but beneath it, something stronger, a fierce determination to protect her pack, her friends, the family that had finally begun believing in her. She met the charging wolf's attack head-on, and the impact sent both of them tumbling across the forest floor, claws and teeth flashing in a blur of motion that left Elena's instincts taking over completely, her body moving with a speed and precision that surprised even her own conscious mind. The unfamiliar wolf was strong, clearly experienced in combat, but Elena found herself matching its strength with unexpected ease, her ancient bloodline apparently granting her capabilities that went beyond what mere weeks of training could explain. The other unfamiliar wolves hesitated at the edge of the clearing, seemingly uncertain how to respond to the unexpected power their leader now faced. This hesitation gave Damien and the others crucial time, and Elena heard Damien shouting something behind her, though she could not make out the words over the roaring intensity of her own heartbeat. The scarred wolf managed to land a glancing blow against Elena's shoulder, drawing blood and pain that flared bright and sharp through her side. But rather than weakening her, the pain seemed to sharpen her focus further, and she countered with a decisive strike that sent the larger wolf sprawling backward, clearly caught off guard by the strength behind her attack. Sensing an opportunity, Elena did not press her advantage further, instead, retreating quickly to rejoin Damien and the others, understanding that survival, not victory, remained their primary objective. The scarred wolf, apparently recognizing that pursuing further conflict might not favor its pack, let out another sharp howl, calling its companions back, rather than continuing the chase. The scouting party did not stop running until they were safely back within the boundaries of Blackthorn territory, collapsing against the trees near the settlement's edge. Breathing hard from the desperate flight, Elena shifted back to her human form, wincing at the pain still radiating from the wound on her shoulder. "You're hurt," Damien said immediately, moving to examine the injury, with obvious concern etched across his face. "I'll be fine," Elena said, though the pain made her words slightly less confident than she intended. "We need to report what we saw to your father immediately." As they made their way back into the settlement, word spread quickly about the confrontation, and Elena found herself once again the center of attention, though this time the focus carried undeniable respect rather than mere curiosity. She had faced a dangerous, unknown threat and protected her scouting party through sheer strength and instinct, exactly the kind of guardian action the ancient legends had described. Gareth listened intently as Damien recounted their encounter, his expression growing increasingly troubled as he absorbed the details of the disciplined, unfamiliar wolf pack now testing their borders. "This confirms our worst fears," he said finally. "We are facing an organized threat, not simple rogue wolves passing through our territory. We must prepare this entire pack for the possibility of sustained conflict." Elena, despite the pain still throbbing in her shoulder, felt a strange sense of purpose settling over her as she listened to the Alpha's grave assessment. For years she had felt useless, invisible, a burden rather than an asset to her pack. Today, for the first time, she had used her strength to protect others, and whatever challenges lay ahead, she found herself ready to face them. Not as the wolfless girl who had once been humiliated in front of everyone, but as something far more powerful, and far more necessary to her pack's survival, than she had ever imagined herself becoming. In the days following the confrontation along the northern border, the Blackthorn settlement transformed into something resembling a pack preparing for war. Additional patrols were organized around the clock, weapons and defensive strategies were reviewed in urgent meetings, and every capable fighter, Elena included, spent long hours training to ensure they would be ready for whatever threat the unfamiliar wolves might eventually bring to their doorstep. Elena's shoulder healed quickly, faster than any injury she had experienced before her transformation, a fact that Marcus attributed to the ancient bloodline now coursing through her veins. The first wolves were said to heal faster than ordinary wolves, he explained during one of their training sessions. It seems the legends carried more truth than any of us initially believed. As the days passed, Elena found herself spending increasing amounts of time with Damien, their shared experience during the border confrontation having forged a bond that neither of them had anticipated, given the painful history of their initial interactions. He often sought her out during training breaks, asking about her progress, offering encouragement that felt genuine rather than politically motivated. "You've grown remarkably strong in such a short time," he said one afternoon, as they rested near the edge of the training grounds, both exhausted from an intense sparring session. "I find myself constantly amazed by what you're capable of." "I had good motivation," Elena said, allowing herself a small, teasing smile. "Someone once told me quite publicly that I would never amount to anything as a wolf." Damien winced visibly at the reminder, though he did not shy away from the accountability her words implied. "I deserved that," he said quietly. "I think about that night often, Elena. I cannot take back what I said, but I promise you, every day I try to prove I have become someone different from the person who humiliated you at that ceremony." Elena studied his face, searching for any lingering trace of the arrogant, dismissive young man who had once caused her so much pain. Instead, she found genuine humility, real growth, someone who had clearly reflected deeply on his past behavior and worked to become better because of it. "I believe you," she said finally, surprising herself with how easily the words came. "You have changed, Damien. I can see it in everything you do now." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps, and both turned to see Sophie approaching with an expression that immediately signaled urgent news. The elders have received word from an allied pack to the east, she said, slightly out of breath from her rushed arrival. They report seeing organized wolf movements similar to what you encountered, moving through their territory as well. This threat extends beyond just our borders. Elena and Damien exchanged a concerned glance before rising quickly to follow Sophie toward the elders' meeting hall, where they found Gareth and the council already deep in discussion with a messenger from the neighboring Ashford pack. They are systematically testing every pack's defenses along this entire region. The messenger, a wolf named Grant, explained as Elena and Damien entered the hall. Our alpha believes this represents a coordinated effort, though we still do not understand the motivation behind it. Could this be connected to the old legends about the first wolves? Agatha asked, turning her attention toward Elena. Perhaps word of your awakening has spread further than we initially realized, drawing unwanted attention from forces seeking to eliminate any resurgence of that ancient bloodline before it grows too powerful to control. The suggestion sent a chill through the room, and Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling even more heavily upon her shoulders. If her transformation had somehow drawn dangerous attention to the entire region, then countless pack members beyond just her own community might now be at risk because of what she had become. We need more information, Gareth said firmly, cutting through the rising tension in the hall. Grant, please convey our willingness to coordinate with Ashford Pack and any other allies willing to share intelligence about these unfamiliar wolves. If this threat truly spans multiple territories, we will need unified strength to properly address it. As the meeting continued, discussing strategy and potential alliances, Elena found her mind wandering to the deeper implications of what the elders had suggested. Had her very existence, the awakening of this ancient bloodline she had not asked for, somehow endangered not just her own pack, but the surrounding region entirely? You look troubled, Damien said quietly, noticing her distracted expression as the meeting continued around them. What if this is my fault? Elena whispered back, what if these wolves are here because of me? Because my transformation somehow signaled something to enemies we don't even understand. Damien's expression softened, and he reached out, briefly squeezing her hand in a gesture of comfort that felt entirely natural, despite the complicated history between them. None of this is your fault, Elena. You did not choose this bloodline, and you certainly did not choose to have it awaken during such difficult circumstances. Whatever threat we are facing, it exists independent of your choices. All we can do now is prepare to face it together, as a unified pack. Elena appreciated his words, though the nagging worry did not fully disappear. As the meeting concluded, and pack members began dispersing to attend to their various responsibilities, Elena found herself approached by Agatha, the elder's expression carrying a seriousness that suggested she wished to speak privately. Walk with me, Agatha said, and Elena followed her outside the hall, into the quiet evening air settling over the settlement. I sense your concern, Agatha said, once they were alone, away from the bustling activity of pack preparations. You worry that your awakening has somehow endangered others. Hasn't it? Elena asked. If these wolves are connected to the ancient legends, connected to my bloodline specifically, then doesn't that mean I bear some responsibility for whatever danger now threatens not just our pack, but our allies as well? Agatha considered the question carefully, before responding, her ancient eyes carrying a wisdom that seemed to see past Elena's immediate worry into something deeper. The first wolves were guardians, Elena, not causes of destruction. If ancient legends hold truth, and if these unfamiliar wolves truly represent some threat connected to your bloodline's resurgence, consider this possibility instead. Perhaps you were not the cause of this danger at all. Perhaps this danger has always existed, waiting in the shadows, and your bloodline simply awakened because the world sensed its return was finally necessary. Elena absorbed this perspective slowly, feeling something shift within her understanding of the situation. Rather than viewing herself as an unwitting catalyst for danger, perhaps she needed to consider that her transformation represented exactly what the ancient legends suggested, a guardian spirit awakening specifically because protection was needed, not because her existence had somehow created new threats. You believe I'm meant to protect this pack, Elena said slowly, not just from these unfamiliar wolves, but from whatever larger danger they might represent. I believe, Agatha said carefully, that your ancestors did not choose to gift this bloodline randomly through the generations. Whether by fate, by ancient magic, or simply by the natural workings of inheritance and circumstance, You carry this power now, at precisely the moment your pack, and perhaps this entire region, needs guardians, capable of standing against threats that ordinary strength cannot overcome. Elena felt the weight of this responsibility settling over her, heavier than anything she had carried before, yet somehow also carrying a strange sense of purpose that had been entirely absent from her life before that fateful night in the forest. For years she had felt like a burden to her pack, contributing nothing of value, overlooked and dismissed by nearly everyone around her. Now, standing beside one of the pack's most respected elders, she understood that whatever came next, whatever conflict eventually erupted from the tension building along their borders, she possessed the strength and the calling to face it head-on. "I won't let this pack down," Elena said firmly, meeting Agatha's gaze with newfound determination. "Whatever these wolves want, whatever danger is truly approaching, I will do everything within my power to protect the people I love." Agatha smiled, a warm expression that carried genuine pride and confidence in the young woman standing before her. "I believe you will, child. The ancestors chose well when they finally allowed this bloodline to awaken within you." As Elena made her way back toward her family's home that evening, the settlement around her buzzing with quiet preparation for whatever conflict lay ahead, she found herself reflecting on how dramatically her life had changed since that humiliating night at the claiming ceremony. The girl who had once been mocked as wolfless now carried the weight of ancient guardian legends upon her shoulders, and rather than feeling crushed by this responsibility, she felt something entirely unexpected. She felt ready. 2 weeks after the initial confrontation along the northern border, the tension that had been building throughout the Blackthorn settlement finally reached its breaking point. A messenger arrived in the early morning hours, exhausted and breathless, carrying urgent news from the border patrols that had been watching for any sign of renewed activity from the unfamiliar wolves. "They're moving toward us," the messenger reported to Alpha Gareth and the assembled elders, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "A large group, far more than the dozen we encountered before. Our trackers estimate at least 40 wolves, moving with clear purpose toward our settlement." The news spread through the pack with alarming speed, and within an hour, every capable fighter had gathered near the central meeting hall, weapons and defensive positions being organized, with an urgency that reflected the very real danger now approaching their home. Elena stood among the assembled defenders, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination, as she absorbed the reality of what was about to unfold. "We cannot simply wait for them to reach our settlement," Gareth announced to the gathered fighters, his expression grim but resolute. "We will meet this threat at the border, where we have the advantage of familiar terrain and prepared defensive positions." Damien stepped forward, standing beside his father, with the confident bearing of a future leader, stepping fully into his responsibilities. "I will lead the front line," he said firmly, "alongside Elena and our strongest fighters. We cannot allow these wolves to reach the settlement where our families and children remain vulnerable." Elena felt a surge of fierce determination at his words, understanding that whatever fear lingered in her heart, retreat was simply not an option when so many innocent lives depended on their pack's ability to defend its territory. She thought of her mother, her father, Mira, and Sophie, all the people she loved who would be directly endangered if these unfamiliar wolves succeeded in breaching their defenses. "I'm ready," Elena said, stepping forward alongside Damien, her voice carrying a strength and conviction that would have been unimaginable from the frightened, humiliated girl she had been just weeks earlier. The defenders moved quickly toward the northern border, forming defensive lines along the natural choke points, where the forest terrain would give them the greatest tactical advantage. Elena found herself positioned near the front of their formation, alongside Damien, Callum, and several of the pack's most experienced fighters, all watching the tree line with tense anticipation as the sun climbed higher in the morning sky. "There," Callum said suddenly, pointing toward movement visible through the distant trees. "They're here." The unfamiliar wolves emerged from the forest in organized ranks, exactly as the messenger had described, their numbers even more intimidating when viewed directly, rather than simply reported through second-hand accounts. At their front stood the same scarred wolf Elena had confronted weeks earlier, its dark fur bristling with obvious aggression as it surveyed the defensive lines arrayed against its approach. For a tense moment, both sides simply stared at each other across the clearing that separated them, neither wanting to be the first to initiate what would clearly become a devastating confrontation. Then, without warning, the scarred wolf let out a sharp, commanding howl, and the entire opposing force surged forward in a coordinated charge that immediately shattered the tense standoff. "Hold the line!" Gareth's voice boomed across the clearing, and the Blackthorn defenders braced themselves as the wave of unfamiliar wolves crashed against their formation. Elena felt her transformation take hold almost instinctively, her silver wolf form emerging just as the first wave of enemy wolves reached their position. The battle that followed unfolded in a chaotic blur of motion, claws and teeth flashing amid desperate cries, and the sounds of fierce combat echoing through the forest clearing. Elena fought with a ferocity she had never known she possessed, her ancient bloodline granting her strength and speed that allowed her to hold her ground against multiple attackers simultaneously. She caught glimpses of Damien fighting nearby, his own combat skills honed through years of training, now fully engaged in defending their home and the people they both cared about. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity, though Elena later realized it had lasted less than an hour, the intensity of combat distorting her perception of time entirely. She fought alongside her packmates with fierce determination, protecting fallen comrades, striking down attackers who threatened to breach their defensive line, drawing on reserves of strength she had not known existed within her before this moment. Gradually, the tide of battle began shifting in favor of the Blackthorn defenders, their superior knowledge of the terrain, and their fierce determination to protect their home, eventually overwhelming the numerical advantage the unfamiliar wolves had initially possessed. The scarred wolf leader, recognizing that victory was slipping away from his forces, let out another sharp howl, signaling a retreat that the remaining attackers quickly followed. As the unfamiliar wolves fled back into the forest, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared, an exhausted silence settled over the battlefield, broken only by the labored breathing of the victorious but battered defenders. Elena shifted back to her human form, surveying the scene around her with a mixture of relief and lingering adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "We held them," Damien said, approaching with visible relief evident in his expression, though several cuts and bruises marked his own hard-fought battle. "Elena, you were incredible out there. I have never seen anyone fight with such skill and determination." "We all fought together," Elena said, though she could not deny the fierce pride she felt at having successfully defended her pack from such a significant threat. "This victory belongs to everyone who stood their ground today." As the pack began the process of tending to their wounded and assessing the aftermath of the battle, Gareth approached Elena directly, his expression carrying a respect that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. "You fought with the strength and courage the ancient legends described," he said. "Whatever doubts I once carried about the significance of your bloodline, they have been thoroughly answered today." Elena felt a complex mixture of emotions as she absorbed his words, pride at having proven herself capable of protecting her pack, but also lingering exhaustion and the sobering weight of having participated in her first true battle. She thought of the ceremony where Damien had once called her wolfless, barely pack at all, and reflected on how dramatically circumstances had shifted since that painful night. "This victory does not mean the threat has ended," Agatha said, joining the conversation with her usual measured wisdom. "These wolves retreated today, but their coordinated organization suggests a larger force or purpose behind their actions. We must remain vigilant and continue strengthening our defenses for whatever challenges may still lie ahead." Elena nodded, understanding the truth in the elder's warning, even as relief at their immediate victory washed through her exhausted body. Whatever came next, whatever larger conflict this battle represented merely the opening chapter of, she found herself ready to face it, not as the overlooked, humiliated girl from that fateful ceremony, but as a true guardian of her pack, exactly as the ancient legends had foretold. As evening fell over the settlement, the pack gathered to honor those who had fought bravely and to mourn the few losses suffered during the intense confrontation. Elena stood among her packmates, no longer feeling like an outsider looking in, but as a genuine, respected member of the community that had once dismissed her so completely. The transformation that had begun with her humiliation at the claiming ceremony had led her to this moment, standing proud and strong among the very people who had once called her wolfless, now recognized as one of their most capable defenders. In the aftermath of the battle, the Blackthorn pack entered a period of uneasy calm, using the respite to strengthen their defenses, while continuing to gather information about the mysterious wolves who had retreated so suddenly after their failed assault. Elena spent her days split between intensive training sessions and long discussions with the elders, who remained convinced that the threat they had faced was far from fully resolved. 3 days after the battle, a scout returned with news that shifted the entire situation once again. "We found their camp," the scout reported to the assembled pack leadership, breathing hard from his urgent journey back to the settlement. "Several miles north of our territory, hidden in a valley I had never explored before. There is something you all need to see." Elena, Damien, and a small group of trusted fighters accompanied Gareth and the scout back toward the location, moving cautiously through unfamiliar terrain until they reached a ridge overlooking a hidden valley below. What they saw confirmed the elders' worst fears, while also revealing something none of them had anticipated. The camp below was clearly organized, tents and structures arranged with military precision, but at its center stood something that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. A massive stone structure, ancient and weathered, covered in symbols that looked eerily similar to the markings described in the pack's oldest historical records regarding the first wolves. "That structure," Agatha said, having insisted on accompanying the group despite her advanced age, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and concern. "I have only seen references to something like this in the very oldest of our historical texts. It is believed to be connected to the original founding of not just our pack, but several ancient wolf territories throughout this entire region." "What does it mean?" Damien asked, studying the strange structure with obvious confusion. "According to legend," Agatha continued, "this kind of ancient site was said to hold power, capable of either awakening or suppressing the bloodlines of the first wolves, depending on who controlled it and what rituals were performed there. If these wolves have taken control of such a site, their purpose may extend far beyond simple territorial conquest." Elena felt a chill run through her as she absorbed this information, understanding that whatever these mysterious wolves truly wanted, it appeared connected directly to the ancient power that now ran through her own veins. "Are they trying to awaken more bloodlines like mine, or trying to suppress mine specifically?" "We cannot know for certain without further investigation," Agatha admitted. "But given their aggressive actions toward our pack specifically, following so closely after your own transformation, I fear they may see you as either a threat to eliminate or a resource to control." The group observed the camp for several more hours, carefully documenting troop movements and defensive positions before retreating back toward their own territory to report their findings to the full pack council. The revelation about the ancient structure added an entirely new dimension to the conflict, transforming what had initially seemed like a straightforward territorial dispute into something far more complex and potentially dangerous. That evening, as the elders debated their next course of action, Elena found herself drawn away from the tense discussions, seeking a quiet moment alone to process everything that had unfolded since that fateful ceremony weeks earlier. She walked toward the same forest clearing where her transformation had first occurred, the memory of that painful, powerful night still vivid in her mind. "I thought I might find you here." Damien's voice came from behind her, and she turned to see him approaching with careful steps, clearly respecting the private nature of the space she had chosen. "I needed to think," Elena admitted. "Everything that's happened, the battle, this ancient structure, the possibility that these wolves see me as either a threat or something to be controlled. It's overwhelming." Damien moved to stand beside her, both of them looking out over the same clearing where her wolf had first emerged. "You are not facing this alone, Elena. Whatever these wolves want, whatever ancient power connects to your bloodline, this entire pack stands ready to protect you, exactly as you protected us during that battle." Elena felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with her wolf's transformation and everything to do with the genuine care evident in Damien's words. "I never imagined, after that night at the ceremony, that we would end up here, standing together like this." "Neither did I," Damien admitted, his expression carrying real vulnerability. "I have thought often about how differently things could have unfolded if I had simply treated you with kindness instead of cruelty from the very beginning. I do not deserve the trust you have shown me since then, but I am grateful for it every single day." "You've earned it," Elena said softly. "Through your actions, your consistent effort to become someone better than the person who humiliated me that night. People can change, Damien, and you have proven that beyond any doubt." They stood together in comfortable silence for several long moments, the weight of the approaching conflict momentarily forgotten in the quiet intimacy of the forest clearing. Finally, Damien spoke again, his voice carrying a seriousness that suggested he had been considering his next words carefully. "Whatever happens with these wolves, with this ancient structure and whatever power it holds," he said, "I want you to know that my feelings toward you have grown into something far beyond simple respect or admiration for your strength. I care for you deeply, Elena, in ways I never expected possible, given how our relationship began." Elena felt her heart race at his words, understanding that he was voicing something she herself had been feeling, but had not yet found the courage to acknowledge fully. "I care for you too," she admitted. "Despite everything, despite the pain of that ceremony, I find myself drawn to the person you've become." The moment between them felt significant, a genuine connection forming amid the chaos and danger surrounding their entire pack, proof that even in the darkest circumstances, unexpected light could still find a way to emerge. Their quiet reflection was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps, and both turned to see Sophie hurrying toward them with an urgent expression. "The elders need you both immediately," she said. "They have made a decision about how to respond to the threat from those wolves and the ancient structure. Everything is about to change very quickly." Elena and Damien exchanged a brief glance, understanding that whatever peaceful moment they had shared was about to give way to the demanding reality of the conflict still unfolding around them. As they followed Sophie back toward the settlement, Elena found herself steeling her resolve, understanding that the coming days would likely test her strength and courage more severely than anything she had faced so far, but also feeling more confident than ever that she possessed exactly what her pack needed to face whatever challenges still lay ahead. The Elders' Council had reached a decision that filled the meeting hall with tense anticipation as Elena, Damien, and Sophie arrived. Gareth stood at the center of the gathered leadership, his expression carrying the weight of a choice that would shape the pack's future for generations to come. "We cannot simply wait for these wolves to launch another assault against our settlement," Gareth announced once everyone had settled into their places. "The ancient structure they now control represents a threat too significant to ignore. We have decided to launch a direct strike against their camp before they can fully understand or utilize whatever power that site holds." Elena felt her pulse quicken at the announcement, understanding the enormous risk such a strategy carried. "You want to attack them directly, in their own stronghold?" "It is our best chance to end this threat decisively," Gareth confirmed. "Our scouts report the wolves have not yet fully activated the structure's power, suggesting they may still be attempting to understand its ancient mechanisms. If we strike now, before they succeed, we may prevent whatever catastrophic outcome that power could unleash." Agatha stepped forward, her expression grave. "There is more you need to understand, Elena. Our research into the oldest texts suggests the structure requires a bloodline carrier, someone with the ancient first wolf heritage, to properly activate its power. Given that you are the only known carrier of this bloodline currently active, we believe these wolves may be planning to capture you specifically, forcing you to activate the structure for their own purposes." The revelation sent a wave of cold fear through Elena's chest. "They want to use me? To force me into unleashing whatever power that structure holds?" "It appears increasingly likely," Edmund confirmed, "which is precisely why we cannot simply wait for them to make their move. We must act first, striking their camp and disabling or destroying the structure, before they can execute whatever plan they have devised." Damien stepped forward immediately, his protective instincts clearly engaged by the direct threat now identified against Elena specifically. "I will not allow Elena to be used as some tool for these wolves' ambitions. Whatever plan we execute, her safety must remain our absolute priority." "Agreed," Gareth said firmly, "which is why this mission requires careful planning and our very best fighters. Elena, given that the structure appears connected specifically to your bloodline, we believe your participation may be necessary, though we understand if the personal danger involved gives you pause." Elena considered the request carefully, weighing the very real fear building within her against the understanding that her pack, and potentially the entire surrounding region, faced genuine danger if these wolves succeeded in their apparent plan. "I'll go," she said finally, her voice steady despite the fear still coursing through her. "If this threat is connected to my bloodline, then I have a responsibility to help stop it, whatever the personal risk." The following days passed in a blur of intense preparation, the pack's most skilled fighters training alongside Elena to develop a coordinated strategy for infiltrating the enemy camp and neutralizing the threat posed by the ancient structure. Damien remained close by her side throughout the preparations, his presence offering a steady source of comfort and determination as the mission's departure date approached. Finally, under the cover of pre-dawn darkness, a carefully selected strike team departed the Blackthorn settlement, moving with silent precision toward the hidden valley where the enemy camp and its ancient structure awaited. Elena walked among the group, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fierce determination, understanding that the coming hours would likely determine not just her own fate, but potentially the safety of her entire pack and the surrounding region. They reached the ridge overlooking the enemy camp, just as the first hints of dawn began lightening the eastern sky, and Gareth signaled for the team to spread out into their predetermined positions, waiting for the precise moment to launch their coordinated assault. "Remember the plan," Damien whispered to Elena, as they crouched behind a large boulder overlooking the camp below. "Callum and his team will create a diversion at the eastern perimeter. Once their attention is drawn away, we move directly toward the structure, disable it before they can react, and retreat before their main force can effectively respond." Elena nodded, her focus narrowing entirely on the mission ahead, despite the fear still churning in her stomach. Below them, the camp showed signs of early morning activity, wolves moving about their daily routines with no apparent awareness of the danger approaching from the surrounding ridgeline. The diversion began exactly as planned, sudden shouts and the sounds of combat erupting from the eastern side of the camp as Callum's team executed their portion of the strategy. Elena watched as the majority of the camp's defenders rushed toward the commotion, exactly as anticipated, leaving the central structure and its immediate surroundings significantly less guarded than before. "Now," Damien said, and the team began moving quickly down the ridge toward the ancient stone structure at the camp's center, using the chaos of the diversion to mask their approach. They reached the structure with surprising ease, the few remaining guards quickly and quietly neutralized by the skilled fighters accompanying Elena and Damien. Up close, the ancient stone carried an almost tangible energy, symbols carved into its weathered surface, seeming to pulse faintly, with a power that Elena could feel resonating within her own bloodline. "How do we disable it?" Damien asked, studying the structure with obvious uncertainty about how to proceed. Before Elena could respond, a sharp, commanding voice rang out from behind them. "You should not have come here." They turned to find the scarred wolf leader standing at the edge of the clearing, no longer in wolf form but rather as a tall, imposing man, with the same jagged scar visible across his face, several remaining guards flanking his position with weapons drawn. "You've been targeting my pack," Elena said, stepping forward despite the obvious danger their discovery now represented. "Why? What do you want from this structure? From me?" The scarred man studied her with an expression that mixed calculation and something almost like reluctant respect. "You truly do not understand what you carry within you, do you? The bloodline of the first wolves was never meant to remain hidden forever. It was meant to be gathered, unified, used to restore the ancient power that once protected this entire region from threats far greater than anything your small pack has ever faced." "What threats?" Elena demanded, though a growing sense of dread suggested she might not want to know the answer. "Long ago," the scarred man continued, "before your pack's ancestors settled these lands, dark forces threatened to consume this entire region. The first wolves were created specifically to combat that threat, their combined power capable of sealing away dangers that ordinary wolves could never hope to face alone. But as centuries passed, that ancient evil began stirring once again, and the bloodlines meant to combat it had scattered and weakened across countless generations." Elena felt the weight of this revelation settling over her, understanding that the conflict she now faced might extend far beyond simple territorial disputes, or even the immediate threat posed by these wolves before her. "You're trying to gather the scattered bloodlines, to use this structure to reunite that ancient power." "Precisely," the scarred man confirmed. "And you, carrying one of the strongest awakened bloodlines in generations, represent exactly what we need to properly activate this structure's true potential." "By force," Damien said angrily, stepping protectively closer to Elena. "By threatening her pack, attacking innocent people who had nothing to do with whatever ancient conflict you're trying to resolve." "Sometimes necessity requires difficult choices," the scarred man said, though something in his expression suggested even he did not fully believe his own justification. The threat we face, if left unaddressed, will eventually consume every pack in this region, including your own. We simply sought to expedite what fate had already begun. Elena studied the ancient structure beside her, then looked back at the scarred man and his remaining guards, understanding that whatever truth existed in his claims about ancient evil, his methods of pursuing that goal had already caused genuine harm to her pack and endangered countless innocent lives. "There has to be another way," she said firmly. "A way to address whatever threat you're describing without forcing bloodlines into cooperation through violence and intimidation." "Perhaps," the scarred man acknowledged, "though time may not favor such patient solutions, the ancient evil grows stronger with each passing year, and scattered, isolated bloodlines like yours cannot hope to stand against it alone when the final confrontation eventually arrives." As the tense standoff continued, Elena felt the ancient structure beside her seeming to pulse with growing intensity, as though sensing the presence of her awakened bloodline and responding to the charged atmosphere of the confrontation unfolding around it. She realized, with sudden clarity, that whatever choice she made in this moment would likely determine not just the outcome of this immediate conflict, but potentially the trajectory of challenges that lay far beyond anything she had yet encountered. "I will not be forced into anything," Elena said finally, her voice carrying newfound strength and determination. "But I am willing to discuss this threat you describe, to understand what genuine cooperation might look like, once you cease these attacks against my pack, and demonstrate good faith, rather than continued aggression." The scarred man studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing her offer against his own urgent timeline and methods. Finally, he gestured for his remaining guards to lower their weapons. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your words," he said slowly. "Violence has clearly failed to achieve our purpose here today. Perhaps a different approach deserves consideration." The tension in the clearing gradually eased, though Elena remained cautious, understanding that trust would need to be earned carefully, given everything that had transpired between their two groups. As dawn fully broke over the hidden valley, illuminating the ancient structure and the uneasy truce forming around it, Elena realized that her journey, which had begun with humiliation at a simple claiming ceremony, had led her to a confrontation with challenges and responsibilities far greater than she could have ever imagined possible. The weeks following the tense standoff at the ancient structure brought significant change to the Blackthorn pack and the surrounding region. What had begun as violent conflict gradually transformed into careful, cautious diplomacy, with representatives from Elena's pack and the scarred man's group, who introduced themselves as the Ember Coalition, meeting regularly to discuss the ancient threat he had described, and how various packs might work together to address it, without resorting to the coercion and violence that had initially characterized their approach. Elena found herself at the center of these negotiations, her unique position as an awakened bloodline carrier, making her perspective invaluable to discussions about how the scattered First Wolf heritage might be properly honored and utilized without repeating the mistakes of forced cooperation that had nearly led to devastating conflict between their communities. "Your approach has fundamentally changed how we think about this entire situation," Marlowe, the scarred man whose full name Elena had finally learned during their negotiations, admitted during one particularly productive meeting. "We spent so long believing force was the only path toward gathering the strength needed to face the ancient threat. You have shown us that genuine cooperation, built on trust rather than coercion, offers a far more sustainable path forward." "Trust takes time to build," Elena reminded him, though she could not deny the progress that had been made since their initial confrontation. "But I believe we share the same ultimate goal, protecting our communities from whatever danger truly threatens this region. That shared purpose gives us a foundation to work from." As the negotiations progressed, the Blackthorn Pack's relationship with their former adversaries gradually shifted from wary distrust toward cautious alliance. Elena continued her training, working not just with her own pack's instructors, but eventually with representatives from the Ember Coalition as well, learning more about the ancient legends surrounding the First Wolves, and beginning to understand the true scope of the responsibility that had settled upon her shoulders since that fateful night of her awakening. Throughout this period of transition and growth, her relationship with Damien continued deepening as well. Their shared experiences during the conflict, and subsequent negotiations forging a bond that felt increasingly permanent and significant. One evening, several months after the initial confrontation at the ancient structure, Damien approached Elena as she practiced alone near the training grounds, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. "I have been thinking," he said, settling beside her on the grass, "about how far we have both come since that night at the claiming ceremony. I was cruel and foolish, and you were hurt and humiliated in front of everyone we know. Yet somehow, through everything that followed, we found our way to this moment together. Fate has a strange sense of humor," Elena said, smiling softly as she leaned into his familiar, comforting presence. "I never imagined that ceremony, the worst night of my life at the time, would eventually lead to everything that's happened since. The awakening, the battles, even the beginning of what we now share together." "I have spoken with my father," Damien said, his tone shifting to something more serious and deliberate. "About the succession plans for pack leadership, about what our future might look like, given everything that has changed since your bloodline awakened." Elena felt her heart quicken slightly, understanding the implications behind his careful words. "What did he say?" "He believes, and I agree completely, that the pack would benefit enormously from leadership that combines traditional strength with the wisdom and guardian heritage you carry within your bloodline," Damien said. "Elena, I know we have only recently found our way back to genuine connection after everything that happened between us. But I find myself hoping for a future where we might lead this pack together, as true partners in every sense." Elena studied his face, seeing genuine hope and vulnerability there, so different from the arrogant confidence he had displayed during that painful ceremony months earlier. "Are you asking me to consider becoming your mate? Officially, through proper pack tradition this time?" "I am," Damien confirmed, his voice carrying quiet sincerity. "Not because of political convenience or bloodline significance, though I acknowledge those factors exist, but because I have come to care for you more deeply than I ever imagined possible, and I cannot picture a future for this pack, or for myself, that does not include you standing beside me." Elena felt tears gathering in her eyes, though this time they stemmed from joy rather than the pain and humiliation that had once defined her relationship with this same young man. "I accept," she said softly, "not because of what I have become, but because of who you have proven yourself capable of being, through months of consistent growth and genuine partnership." Their engagement was announced formally before the entire pack several weeks later, during a ceremony that stood in stark contrast to the humiliation Elena had experienced at that original claiming ceremony. This time, instead of mockery and cruel dismissal, the gathered pack members offered genuine celebration, recognizing the remarkable journey that had transformed the overlooked, wolfless girl into a powerful guardian, whose strength and wisdom now promised to guide their pack's future, alongside their beloved future alpha. Elena's parents watched with visible pride, as their daughter, once dismissed and mocked throughout the pack, now stood at the center of genuine celebration and respect. Mira embraced her sister warmly, all traces of their earlier estrangement finally healed through months of rebuilding trust and connection. Sophie stood nearby, with tears of happiness in her eyes, having supported Elena through every difficult moment since that first devastating night in the forest. As the celebration continued into the evening, Elena found a quiet moment to step away from the crowd, walking once more toward the forest clearing, where her transformation had first occurred so many months earlier. Damien found her there, exactly as he had during so many pivotal moments throughout their journey together. "Do you ever think about that night?" Elena asked, as he joined her beneath the same trees where everything had truly begun. "The pain, the fear, not knowing what was happening to my body, or what it would mean for my future." "Often," Damien admitted. "I think about how differently everything could have unfolded if I had simply treated you with basic kindness from the beginning, rather than allowing pride and cruelty to guide my actions. But if you had," Elena said thoughtfully, "perhaps I never would have run into this forest that night. Perhaps my wolf never would have awakened when it did, and everything that followed, the battle, the negotiations with the Ember Coalition, even our relationship, might never have happened at all." Damien considered this perspective carefully. "Do you believe everything happened exactly as it needed to then? Even the pain of that ceremony?" "I believe," Elena said slowly, choosing her words with care, "that pain and humiliation, as difficult as they were to endure, ultimately led me toward strength I never knew I possessed. I would not choose to relive that night, but I cannot deny that it set me on a path toward becoming exactly who I was always meant to be. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching moonlight filter through the same branches that had witnessed Elena's incredible transformation so many months earlier. The threat from the ancient darkness Marlowe had described still loomed somewhere in their future, requiring continued vigilance and cooperation between their once hostile communities. But for tonight, surrounded by the beauty of the forest and the promise of the life she had built alongside Damien, Elena allowed herself simply to feel grateful for the remarkable journey that had carried her from that night of devastating humiliation to this moment of genuine joy and hard-earned belonging. The girl who had once been called wolfless, mocked and dismissed by an entire pack, had become something far greater than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined possible. She had discovered not just an extraordinary bloodline and powerful wolf form, but also her own inner strength, resilience, and capacity for forgiveness that had ultimately transformed both her own life and the future of the pack that had once cast her aside so cruelly. As Elena looked up at Damien, seeing genuine love and respect reflected in his eyes, she understood that whatever challenges still lay ahead, whatever ancient threats might yet emerge from the shadows Marlowe had warned about, she would face them, not as the overlooked girl from that painful ceremony, but as the powerful, respected guardian her ancestors had always intended her to become.